So Dan back here with a video, and I'm going to be sharing with you now a newspaper from April 1st, 1945, and I'm going to start doing some videos like this with paper documents in my collection that really capture history as it was happening. These are not necessarily first-hand accounts, but they're accounts written at the time rather than looking at books and other documentaries put together years after it happened. And this particular newspaper is a copy of Stars and Stripes, like I said, from April 1st, 1945. So it's discussing World War II, right then and there at this point. So it's, like I said, it's April 45. The war is drawing to a close here in the European theater. The Nazis are pretty much surrounded and cut off and on all fronts, and they're basically fighting a defensively. There's really no more offensives taking place at this point other than local actions to slow the advance of the Allies. So probably, it's been asked, a lot of people ask, well, why at this point were the Germans still fighting? They had no hope of victory at this point. They're, as it says on the front of the paper, the Allies are across the Rhine, so they're in the heart of Germany at this point. And to answer your question is, in the East, they're fighting tooth and nail to hold back the Soviets. This is partially because Hitler's still alive at this point, and he's delusional. He thinks the war can still be won. He's trying to command basically non-existent army groups, ones that are shattered and broken, and they don't have the resources they once did, but he still thinks on his little tables in his bunker that they're there. But what armies are still able to fight and still have equipment are fighting so ferociously because they fear the reprisal of the Soviets. The Soviets are not big fans of Germany at this point, after everything that's taken place in the previous years since the German army invaded the Soviet Union. There was a lot of atrocities committed by the SS inside Russian territory, and they are out for revenge, and they were merciless even to civilian populations. So the troops left fighting on the east see this as they have to fight in order to allow as many German civilians to retreat west and get as close to the western part of Germany as possible, because it's kind of assumed at this point that Germany probably will get split up in two like it does post-war, and if that's going to happen, you want to be in the western sector. No one wants to be stuck living under the Soviet rule in post-war Germany. So at this point, early April, in the war, the Soviets are advancing. We're about 2 weeks away from the Battle of the Berlin, and the Battle of Berlin would be probably it's the last major battle of the war, and it would be, ferocious fighting. That's a subject for a whole nother video, but the Russians are slowing down at this point. They're preparing to cross the Oder River in the east, and the Germans are digging in at the Zelo Heights. They're getting ready for this one last final battle, in the east. On the west, you have isolated pockets of fighting. There are still units fighting, but for the most part, your regular army troops are surrendering. They know the war is over, and they don't see any reason to carry on. But there are some units still fighting, particularly SS. But some regular Wehrmacht troops are fighting because there are these groups of fanatics from the Nazi Party going around doing these roving court-martials. If you're caught away from your unit, even if you didn't desert, it's very chaotic at this point in the war. Units are getting scattered. If you get caught separated from your unit, they just shoot you dead or hang you there, and they'd leave people hanging in the streets with signs on them saying they were cowards, they were deserters, and So the fanatics within the Nazi Party are driving not only the German army, but even the Volkssturm, the German militia, to keep fighting just out of fear of reprisal. And obviously, some are still fighting because they still believe in the cause, but most at this point are perfectly happy to let things go. So let's see a little bit about what the newspaper actually had to say at this point. You know, first-hand accounts here. So the one column here says Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, that's what that acronym is, reveals U.S. 15th Army east of the Rhine. So they've crossed into the heart of Germany. The Rhine was like the final barrier on the German Western Front. It says French First Army forces drove across the Rhine for the first time since the Neapolitan Wars yesterday and added a 7th Allied Army to the Blitzkrieg as the Supreme Allied Army, Supreme Headquarters Expeditionary Force disclosed for the first time the presence of the U.S. 15th Army east of the Rhine. The crossing by General Jean de Latreille de Tessignes, I know I butchered that French, I'm sorry, French Palinate above Alsace on the 10-mile front came as the U.S. 7th Army's 12th Armored Division broke through the Odenwald Hills east of Mannheim and raced 25 miles to within 6 miles of Würzburg in Bavaria. General Eisenhower's armored avalanche of 11 tank divisions, already deeper into Germany from the west and the Russians from the east, tightened the noose around the Ruhr and swept northeastward in drives already beginning to threaten Berlin and all of northern Germany. Apologize, reading it as a very small print and it's a little faded at this point. So there's some other headlines here. It says Soviets near Vienna. So at this point, the Soviets are getting close to Italy. Clark orders Italians to strike Nazi rear. So mind you, at this point, the Italians have switched sides in the war. Let's see. There's a lot of cool stuff. I'll show some of the other parts of the paper here. But I wanted to show you some other. So here's some other headlines. It says, war sweeps through a right town to bring fear and death for some. Triple air blow winds up record month for air forces. General Ike issues surrender plan to isolated German army units. And then here's a small section I found interesting. It says Nazi post-war aims laid bare by U.S. It says March 31st, Associated Press. Photographic copies of German documents revealing well-arranged post-war plans for perpetuation of Nazi doctrine and determination are in the possession of the U.S. government, the State Department has disclosed. The documents showed German plans to rebuild economically and financially, plans for propaganda and military control, and planning for the part of the Nazi Party members. German industrialists and militarists for renewals of the pre-war cartel agreements, the statement added. So let's see what else we got going on here. Alright, so here we can see the inner pages of this copy of Stars and Stripes. There's some pretty neat stuff here. Probably some stuff that can be a follow-up video, like this whole article about this airborne operation, and it talks about how a member of that unit used to be, or was a native-born German, and I think may have been maybe lived under Nazi Germany, somehow escaped. I have to get into the actual fine print. So here's an honest and convincing statement by a German who never bowed to Nazi might, contrasted with what you knew from people like those who are pictured on these 2 pages. So you can see these are some wartime photos of Hitler at different Nazi rallies. So Here's a kind of a funny cartoon. That's that airborne article continued. I'm going to have to read that and do a follow-up video there. And then here's that article from the front. So it's just pretty cool to be able to view that that information, you know, as it was written as the war was going on versus in a book written years later, I think. So I have quite a collection of different newspapers from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. So I'll keep, you know, as they kind of come up and I have time, I'll continue to document them this way, and hopefully you enjoy looking at this. Alright, so I'll wrap up this newspaper video, and hope you enjoyed it. But within about 5 weeks of that paper being printed, the war in Europe would be over. Germany surrendered on May 8th, and you know, Germany was then split in two, and those on the eastern side of the country were pretty much transported from one terrible regime to another under East Germany. And it wasn't really, for Germany, didn't really completely heal until 1990 when it was reunited. So I can get more into that in another video, but hopefully you enjoy this, and I'll be back soon.